Hi, I'm Anyi from 11158 Scott Spots, and this is a general overview for Pedro Pathing, our path follower. So, what is Pedro Pathing? We call Pedro Pathing a reactive vector follower because it dynamically calculates a set of vectors to follow to be able to stay on the path. So this would allow us to take straight lines, as well as being able to react to any external forces, because we're always recalculating where we need to go. How is it different from other path followers? So let's start with Roadrunner. Roadrunner is pretty beginner friendly. However, it operates under a motion profile. This means that Roadrunner calculates what your wheels need to do throughout the entire trajectory beforehand. This means that it is very difficult to be able to change trajectories on the fly, as well as if any external forces act on your robot, then your robot will just be off and only be able to correct once the motion profile has been completed at the end of the trajectory. Additionally, on splines and lines with tighter turns on them, it can be hard for a Roadrunner to be able to accurately keep track on the lines. Now moving on to Pure Pursuit. Pure Pursuit works based off of a radius look ahead. So what it does is it has a certain search radius around the robot, and it picks the farthest point on the path within the radius and moves towards it in a linear fashion. Some problems with this can arise when you have like a small radius. When you take corners with a small search radius, you might encounter some oscillations. However, if you increase the radius and make it larger, you may find that your robot takes the corners and just cuts through them, rather than actually following the path. This kind of makes it frustrating to be able to create very accurate paths. So now moving on to Pedro Pathing. In Pedro Pathing, we define our paths with Bezier curves, because they're easy to change, as well as get positions, first derivatives, and second derivatives from. Because our follower constantly calculates vectors for where we need to go, we're able to constantly correct throughout the path. This includes correcting our position and heading, which is something that Roadrunner is not capable of doing until the very end. Because it can correct throughout the entire path, this has time savings at the end of the path, because we don't have to spend time waiting for our robot to correct when it has been correcting throughout the entire path. So how does Pedro path? We use a set of vectors to be able to path through, and they are ranked in a hierarchy for the order in which they are applied. The very most important vector is the centripetal force vector. So as you can see here, we can approximate where the robot is on the path with a circle, and when we find the radius of that circle, we can use it to be able to calculate a centripetal force that the robot needs to take in order to stay on the path most effectively. Next is a translational vector, and this is a very simple positional translational correction. It just corrects the robot from its current position to the position of the closest point on the path. However, it does not actually correct along the path itself to the closest point, because that would interfere with the drive vector. So it's prevented from doing that. Next is the heading correction. This corrects where the robot faces to our heading target, which actually doesn't have to be a tangent to the path, but it could be some sort of heading interpolation that you set later on. Finally, we have the drive vector. This vector points us along the path and, well, drives the robot. It moves it forwards, and towards the end of the path, it helps stop the robot, so that way we arrive exactly on our end position. The vectors for Pedro Pathing are applied in this order to the drivetrain, and whenever the vectors that we apply exceed the power that we have for our drivetrain, then the further vectors are not applied. So this means that centripetal force correction and translational correction, as well as heading correction, take precedence above the drive vector. This ensures that we're able to correct back to within tolerable limits before continuing on the path to ensure that we don't hit obstacles, but we're still able to correct throughout the entire path. Moving into the centripetal force correction, how it works is we're able to calculate the curvature of the Bezier curve with the first and second derivatives, and use that curvature to find the radius, because they're inversely related. With that radius, we can then use the centripetal force formula, along with the velocity along the path and the mass of the robot, to be able to calculate the centripetal force the follower needs to take. Then, with a scaling factor that you can tune, we turn that into robot power, and we apply it to the robot. The reason that this being on the top doesn't cause any issues is that if we stray too far from the path, our robot will just naturally not take any power from the drive vector and slow down. This decreases the velocity along the path, and so decreases the centripetal force correction, which allows our next vector, the translational correction, to take effect. Translational correction works very simply. It goes straight back to the closest point in the path, moving faster and harder the farther you are away from it. However, unlike most other followers, we actually split this translational correction up into two different PIDs, a small PID and a large PID. The small PID works within a certain limit of error that you can set. So it is usually tuned to be more aggressive, so that way we can have very good accuracy on the path and on the endpoint of the path. The large PID is tuned to be able to just go within the limits of the small PID, where the small PID can then take over. This is so that way we can have a very aggressive correction for the small PID without worrying about overcorrecting at large error ranges. If you don't want to use the two different PIDs, that's fine. You can set the PID switch limit to something negative or something really, really large, and it will just effectively only use one of the two PIDs. Moving into the heading correction, this operates very similarly to the translational correction, except instead of translational error, it uses heading error, which is just how far off of our target heading that the robot is facing. Like the translational correction, we also have a large and a small PID for the heading correction, for the same reasons as stated before. Now moving to the drive vector. This vector does use a large and small PID like the previous vectors, but it needs to be tuned very carefully because the drive vector is very sensitive. The direction it faces is actually just tangent to the path, since it's the vector that moves us along our path. To find the drive vector, we need to find the zero power deceleration. This is how your robot slows down when power is cut from the drivetrain. To find that, we can run two tuners to find the forward and lateral zero power decelerations of your robot. Then we need to calculate our velocity goal. We do that with simple kinematics, with the kinematics equation on the screen here. When taking into account the velocity goal, as well as how much velocity our robot will lose based off of our zero power deceleration, we're able to decelerate our robot at some specified deceleration throughout the end of the path and still arrive accurately at the end. Additional capabilities. Pedro Pathing is capable of holding points, which means that it can stay at a location and face a certain direction. This is important because it can help improve accuracy at the end of paths, or it can guard against robot contact. So, for example, in the power play season, let's say that you're trying to score on a contested middle junction between two robots. If the other robot bumped into your robot, you would want to be able to hold your position against this external force. So if your robot got bumped, Pedro Pathing would be able to recorrect back onto that point in heading. Pedro Pathing can also be used in teleop to account for centripetal force. Without centripetal force correction, your robot will want to swing towards the outside of whatever corners that you take. However, with centripetal force correction, your robot will instead go through the corner a lot more smoothly. The centripetal force correction is calculated using your same localizer from Autonomous to approximate a first and a second derivative based off of your previous positions. Then, with a modified version of the curvature formula, we're able to calculate the proper correction to allow your robot to take corners smoothly and quickly. And thank you for your time. If you have any further questions, you can contact us at scottsbots10158@gmail.com.